you were trying to figure out how to see yourself there. And hopefully we did have a good number of new to Roma folks in our group. And I'm sure there were more than that throughout the attendance in the workshop here. I just hope that through conversations and hearing from your peers that you were able to have a moment where you could see yourself and your role and connecting to the Roma cycle within your organizations. So we're going to run into the group report section of this. We want to make sure that we have enough time for that to happen. So we just would like for each group, I'm going to call on you, the person who was designated to report out for your group, to please share an overall comment concerning the thoughts from your group on how does, and we're going to start with the executive level, or you know what, we'll start with the frontline level. How about that? We're going to start with the frontline level, and overall on the front line, how does your work support Roma, and overall, how do you interact with others during the phases of the Roma cycle? So the group reporter for the frontline group, if you might step forth and share.
Hi, Marlo. This
Hello, it's my Dave.
Happy Wednesday.
Hello.
Okay, so in our discussion, we actually shared some ruminations about how for us as frontline folks, the achievement results is probably the area where we interact most directly with Roma. So reason being, of course, because we're the ones that kind of have to carry the water. We have to try to get things done. So the achievement of results is both as we're interacting with clients, but also as we're coordinating with the agency at large. So one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, are we being effective? What worked and what didn't? As we achieve or attempt to achieve results, we have to collect all this data. And of course, secondarily to that is the implementation. It all starts really with the implementation. We get kind of handed, this is our mission. This is what we're going to try to accomplish. These are the types of things we're going to try to do. So once we have, in fact, attempted, hopefully successfully, the implementation and achieved results, we then feed very integral information to the evaluation phase. This is where feedback, both internal and external, will inform the assessment, which we may participate in with regard to satisfaction surveys, needs assessments, and various reevaluation processes. And also that would in turn help other levels in their planning. And for us, of course, at the frontline level, we would actually be involved in micro level planning, because we would have to plan how are we going to make changes to very specific tasks that we do as things change. And we recognize that we're changing internally because we're continuously improving, but also the service model has a tendency to change as well because our service environment changes. COVID taught us that. So the continuous improvement doesn't only involve getting better, but it also probably involves getting different.
Yes.
And
Bravo.
I think I kept it under.
Bravo for the frontline group, because you also, it seems from what you're sharing here, your discussion definitely highlighted how there is that cycle within the cycle that David Bano talked about in the beginning, right? That the cycle lives within all levels of the organization. At the frontline level, you're going through a Roma cycle as you are assessing in your achievement and in your delivery, and it's determining how to make changes so that you could improve results that are you're seeking to have accomplished. So wonderful. It's I would have loved to have heard that conversation as well, but we only had time to jump into one. So I'm going to thank you very much, David, for your sharing of the group's thoughts. And so we're going to move into the management level group, and who there would be the presenter for the group.
I believe I was chosen to be presenter.
Yes.
And yes, so management, we discussed and we talked about how we are involved in the entirety of the cycle. We are involved in processes that collect, analyze, and discuss both qualitative and quantitative data with our agencies. We examine community needs and resources and facilitate the processes that make these happen. And we also review internal agency data. We communicate these assessments with everyone, both leadership and stakeholders and frontline workers. And in the facilitating of assessments, focus groups, and the reviewing of agency data, we make sure everyone understands, which sets up buy-in for the next stage, which is planning. So in planning, we use both mission statement and assessment data to identify outcomes and strategies that will really drive the entire agency towards whatever goals we have. We learn the landscape and develop strategies to help our community in ways that help our community. I'll leave it there. So that includes the strategic plan, the community action plan, program plans. And in planning, we also talk, as managers, we really talk to the entirety of the agency all the time. So we're talking both to leadership and to frontline. And in planning, we do so by really moving from the assessment that we have explained to the leadership and they've said, okay, this is what we want to do. And then we help the frontline workers achieve that. Implementation involves a variety of processes that contribute to carrying out strategies. It's also executing strategies and carrying out services to produce results. So we, as managers, our work involves where we deliver this implementation, and we provide the tools to deliver this implementation to our frontline workers. And we also send the message of the implementation both inside and outside the agency. So we let everyone know what we're doing outside and inside. We train and orient those who need it, and plans are really plans are the guide to the implementation and the training. Excuse me, can you all hear me still?
Yes.
Excellent, okay. In the achievement of results, we observe outcomes, we collect data, and we report progress. It can't happen without implementation. And we kind of look at what we know, what we don't know. We facilitate the reports, we aggregate data, we decide what data to collect, and we want to make sure that it's properly documented. So accuracy and QA are paramount. And we have to make sure that we are training to properly collect data, and we want to make sure that we are properly reporting the data, which is part of the evaluation stage. Excellent. So as I mentioned, next comes evaluation. Evaluation can sometimes be a little painful, we talked about, because it really includes looking at yourself and your processes and comparing them with benchmarks, which sometimes you exceed them, sometimes you fall short. And we send the data out, but we also want to use it ourselves. So we want to use that data to improve the processes, so the evaluation can't really happen without the achievement of results. And it starts the process of change, which then leads to where you look for assessment. And that's the entire cycle.
Excellent. Excellent, Thomas. Thank you so much. That was a lot to boil down within this group, because again, but the common themes that you would hear across every single one of those phases of the cycle is that this management group really moves the information, moves the tools that are needed, right, for the frontline to be able to do their work. The management is providing tools, the management is providing information, but they're also providing it to the executive level, right, and the community. So a lot of information sharing is going out from this particular group in order to move through all of the phases of the cycle and keep that strand going, right, and that interconnectedness that was discussed during the group. The group said a lot about how each one of these phases is connected, and kind of the conversation flowed very nicely between each one of those phases of the cycle. Thank you so much for sharing, Thomas. And so to close out, we will move into the executive level group, and who would be sharing on the executive level. Thank you so much for your report, Thomas.
Hi, Marlo. I guess that's me. I'm Tammy Fahey. I'm with the Massachusetts CSBG State Office.
Hi, Tammy.
So we actually had a person who was going to report out, but then she had to drop off. So I'm stepping in here. On the executive group, we actually had split representation between CSBG State Office folks, as well as some executive staff from a handful of CAAs. So some of the general themes of our conversation, I try to sort of think of in terms of, state office, CAA level. But I think what came out is that really we have this dual interest in continuous improvement. And when we're talking about every phase of the cycle, that those sort of things were coming up on whether we were with state offices or CAAs. And of course, how it looks a little bit different depending on your role. We talked about some of the same key documents across all phases of the cycle. For example, the community needs assessment came up quite a bit, strategic plans. In terms of the needs assessment and customer satisfaction surveying, we were all sort of talking about, those are not just exercises in collecting data. They're also about finding out, first of all, what you can do better, but also they can be opportunities to educate, or in some cases even sort of market what your agency is doing to stakeholders, or educating and clients and helping them understand what services you offer. We talked about some other reports that agencies generate, so like programmatic reports or some of the financial reporting to the board, and how we as both state agency staff as well as the agency executives are trying to think about those as more than just required reporting, how to make those more useful tools to better implement plans and achieve results. And if there's anything else from other group members that I missed, feel free to chime in. But
Excellent. Tammy, thank you so much for sharing, because that does crystallize and bring us to a head where the information, everything that is being generated as our organizations are moving through the ROMA cycle does have a greater purpose, right? When you're looking at community action overall across our networks and across the nation, that information is actually contributing to overall those goals that we connected to, right? That we looked at in the very beginning. There's those 3 national goals that are driving, right, the work of community action organizations. That's how we're all interconnected, even though we're in separate organizations and separate communities and we have different roles, but we're all working toward those goals in common. So I loved how you talked about the differences at the executive level based on the roles, how everyone is still contributing to that, and how important it is to look at the information, even though it's and beyond what's required, but really looking at the information for the sake of improvement, and for the sake of expansion, and for the sake of really being responsive to the communities that we serve. Thank you so much for your sharing, Tammy. Thank you everyone for your sharing. So we're gonna hand it back over to Dave so that he can wrap us up.
There we go. Unmute. That's it. Thank you so much. Yeah. So hopefully this was helpful to folks. Hopefully we are all now able to see that ROMA is actually implemented across all levels of the agency, and that everyone is actually involved with it. Go ahead, Kelly, if you want to just pop that whole screen out. So we actually had a very interesting conversation, and one thing I did want to point out is that within our group, boy, I love when I learn things at these, even when you're presenting, boy, you got to learn something at these things. And I'm embarrassed to say that I forgot to write down the name of who brought this up, but it was a young lady who's been in CAPS for a year, who brought up the fact that, and gave us the information, the fact that, boy, ROMA sure does work at all levels, even at the client level. She has to assess the client's needs. She has to develop a plan, implement that plan, make sure that that client is achieving results, figure out if those results weren't achieved, and then reassess what needs to be fixed. So even at the client level, at all levels of our agency, ROMA is implemented. So thanks everybody for participating. Hopefully we've gotten at least an idea or two of how to operationalize or implement ROMA when we get back to our agencies, today and tomorrow, and what we can do moving forward to at least in our section of what we can control, we can turn that into ROMA and into outcome related reporting and into a ROMA model. So thanks for everybody. And I don't know if we have any questions or.
Let's take a look in the chat.
I'm looking in the chat. Does anyone have any, and it doesn't even have to be a question. It can be a thought. It can be anything that you want to share or suggest. Derek from Mass said it would be great if this training could be offered on an annual basis, and that summer is a great time to offer it, maybe even do a deeper dive into different parts of the ROMA cycle. So that's something to keep in mind. And we are going to send out an evaluation, the PowerPoint and the recording from today.
And I actually have a question, if someone could clarify, because I'm not understanding exactly what your idea was related to. So sorry to put you on the spot, but I will for a moment. Eduardo O'Neill said that in Spanish, he says, I need to know how to do this. Would you mind sharing a little more with us in reference to what it was that you would like to learn more about, so that we can add that to our thoughts, as Kelly mentioned? You can share it. You can speak, or you can share it in the chat for us so that we can see that.
Yes. So do you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. So I'm just starting a new role on the agency. So this is a new model that I'm learning. So, I mean, I have learned a lot today with this. So that's why I said I need to know more of this, because I mean, this is the cycle and the resources that we need to implement, to keep implementing with our customers.
Oh, appreciate that. So you were literally reflecting on the fact that ROMA is fascinating and you would like to learn more about it. There we go.
Thank you, guys.
It's funny, I work closely with Eduardo, and we share customers frequently across the agency. He's being very modest, right? I think this work comes to him naturally, and the part that's challenging is seeing how it's formalized here, and understanding that this is a common vernacular that we can use across the agency, and including with our customers, as was so poignantly pointed out earlier.
Excellent.
That's it. So Eduardo, chin up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Ian, also in the group. I think there's so many great ideas. I see that in the chat. There's a comment here that says, David also said, actually 3 continuous improvement loops are happening, right? The macro organization level, the practitioner level, the client level. That's an excellent observation. These loops and the cycle is recurring in and of itself throughout our organization at all levels. And sometimes you may be conscious of it and other times you may not, but you should always be aware and know that it's a living and breathing thing within our organizations.
So if I may ask, because I know that we had, I heard one comment about, can we do this annually? And other folks saying, how do I do this? And how would folks be interested? And I know Marlo and Kelly, we had discussed follow-up meetings, and Rhonda, would folks be interested in breaking this down maybe, and maybe having a session with just frontline, with just executives, with just program managers, and saying, hey, how can we actually move forward within my agency? Here's what I do, and can we get some tips on how I can move this process forward to get ROMA actually moving forward? Would folks be interested in doing that, as follow-up basis?
And you can
just put in the chat who would.
Yeah,
sure.
put it in the chat.
Sure.
I thought maybe there would be a thumbs up.
Oh, yep. You've got some messages popping in.
Sure.
So you can also do thumbs up.
Great.
On your
Cool.
Got some messages.
Good.
likes, I guess.
Good.
You could say.
Yeah.
We'll work on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great.
Not to be a naysayer, but I certainly think the more interesting conversation would involve frontliners and executives and management together, so that we can understand, each other's perspectives on implementing Roma and looking at the, why certain changes need to be made and how to more effectively language that to those people who are, in the usage seat. Right. And seeing the clients and answering the questions of what are you asking me that question now for, et cetera. So
I love that you brought that up. I love that you brought that up, because we did talk about that as well. The point here, of course, right, will be goal and purpose and the outcome of the conversations, right? That dynamic, when we have all groups represented in the conversation, might lead to folks going back to their organizations and having some concrete projects that they'd like to work on collaboratively now that they've had an opportunity to discuss Roma cycle and how does it relate to all of you as a group, right? And then at the individual category level, you might talk more about and taking a deeper dive as to within your specific role, how does your work relate to Roma and what can you do to continue to improve how you are contributing to the implementation of Roma within your organizations. Two very separate and two very important conversations to have. So thank you for bringing that up, Ian.
No, of course, Marla. I think the subtext of Roma really being effective across an agency is languaging how to manage vertically. Yes. And how can I talk to my boss, right? The person who's asking things of me, effectively in I don't know, and basically languaging the challenges that I face and helping them be a part of my solution as opposed to that daily headache. Not that my boss, who you've heard plenty of, is ever a headache for me, but I know that happens in certain work dynamics. I've heard.
Yes. How do we work shoulder to shoulder, right? And not bump against each other, but keep moving forward together. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I agree that co-working of different levels is critical and absolutely important. And I think that's what we've done. Most of our meetings involve everyone coming together and figuring out how it works. The only reason I suggest, one of the reasons I suggest, and I had mentioned this previously, one of the reasons I suggest breaking folks out is sometimes there's a hesitancy to speak openly and to admit that we don't know some things we don't know. This came up in our meeting, that, hey, sometimes we're expected that this is already happening and that we're already doing it right. And the hesitancy to speak, it's easy at the executive level to speak your mind because you're at the executive level. Whereas sometimes at the staff level and the program level, there's a feeling that my executive expects that I've already got this and I'm already doing this. And so I think that some individual sessions of how to operationalize without other groups involved might have some value is the only thing, is what I was alluding to. Right.
Yeah, it can be a two-pronged approach. I think
absolutely.
Both ideas are great.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that, I think we will, unless there are more questions or discussion, because this has been fantastic, but we do want to be respectful of everyone's time and what we've scheduled for today. So I think it's time for Rhonda and Kelly to give their thoughts and really take us home here. But I'm so grateful to be a part of this network and this group of thinkers. Everyone that is involved in Roma to me is always a high level thinker within community action because it's what's needed in order for us to really wrap our brains around these processes and really make them come to life within our organizations. And I commend each and every one of you that has shared here today for the hard work that you're doing, and this year more than ever. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Marlo. Yeah, so like I said, we'll send out the PowerPoint and evaluation and the recording. We really appreciate everyone's time today. Anything else, Rhonda? I mean, we'll follow up with additional training thoughts. And
yeah, I would just like to say again, just to reiterate what both David and Marlo said, just thank you guys so much for your time and your your participation and your openness, not only during this meeting, but just to the concept of ROMA and how vitally important the role that you're playing in your individual agency really is to the whole, bringing all of it together. I think in our description, we said something about we're all a piece of the puzzle, and that really is the truth. And just as Kelly said, we'll be following up. I love the suggestions and the thoughts that you guys have shared in terms of follow-up and what's next. So we'll definitely be taking those things in, as well as comments that you may share on evaluations, to provide you with other opportunities as we move forward. So be on the lookout for information from Kelly.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.